All right. All right. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. We're officially live, I believe so. This is my first time, so cut me a break. Okay. Hello. I'm sorry if I don't do this the smoothest. Make sure the mic's on. But we're doing our best. This is my first live, so bear with me, and please feel free if something is wonky to please write it in the chat and let me know. So yeah. Okay. So, welcome to Angela and Then Some. I'm Angela. I'm just a lady, so please do not come at me. If you disagree or you have some anger welling in you for some reason, hey, I'm just a lady on the internet. I do not even pretend to know everything I'm talking about, but I'm willing and I'm here to discuss it. And I'm gonna do my best at figuring stuff out just like the rest of us. Okay. So, we're here to talk about a lot of things. We'll talk about big things, we'll talk about little things. Some of them my own interests, some of them hopefully yours. And this is a safe, judgment-free zone to kind of just think things through, think them out, hold hold space for things. First and foremost, you know what? I have notes and I need to move them because this is not working where they are. Pardon me while I move things, and I know I could attach the mic, but I just haven't because I didn't want to. Everything cool? Okay. Uh, nope, everything is not cool. Notes are not staying where I want them. Okay. So let's start with, first of all, hi, I'm Angela. Just to get a little bit, get to know me a little bit. I'm Angela. I am a mom, a wife, all that quote unquote good stuff. And I started this channel because after having my daughter, it was rough. Not only pregnancy being just a wreck on the nerves, but then afterwards I would like a pile of mush pretty much. I too was born when my daughter was born, it seems like. So it's been a long journey. I have PCOS, so some health issues in that regard. And this channel was kind of my way of talking with others or putting myself out there in a way that I never had before, as I was more so always the quiet one. I do have social anxiety. I do? I don't know. Growing up, so it was totally a thing that no wonder you stayed quiet, right? Because if you have social anxiety or if you dealt with it, you know that staying quiet, staying in the background, not causing any trouble or having people notice you, that's what you want. But as I got older and after I had my daughter, I realized I was not in the place I wanted to be, like physically, mentally, emotionally, like the body was wrecked, the mental fortitude was wrecked, and so were my emotions. They were everywhere, which could be connected to hormones, but whatever. So this channel, what it means to me now, it did obviously take a lot of figuring out what I'm going to do. So if you look at some of the past videos, it's weird. There's a lot going on. I cleaned it up a bit, so hopefully going forward, it's going to be easier to navigate. But it really stemmed from wanting to speak my truth, meaning instead of staying quiet, instead of just keeping my thoughts to myself, actually, actually just saying them in some sort of semi-safe space, I suppose, because that's what I consider this. And then, I've always thought it's interesting and good for people to discuss things and to bounce ideas off of each other and to kind of hold space for different ideas. Thank you for those who are joining in right now. So just bouncing ideas off of each other, figuring things out, learning from each other, as well as finding my people. I know it's hard to get out there when you don't really know where to go, especially now how the world is. It's hard to find like third spaces, I think it's called, where places where you're not at work, you're not going grocery shopping, but places where people can actually spend time together and, hang out or have the option to hang out, be it parks, community centers, those things. And so this is my way of reaching out, and hopefully the algorithm, YouTube, as well as you who are watching, it can help me figure out where are my people at, pretty much. Because I, for one, am not the most active person. Like, I'm not gonna be just going in crowds of 50 to 100 people asking everybody to be my friend. That'd be weird, and I'm not about that. So this channel will also be about the big and little questions, meaning little questions wise, we'll be talking about fun things, movies, anime, games, things that are maybe weird and maybe you haven't thought that much about it, or I have, and I'm like, let me just ask the weird question that this movie, this game, or this anime kind of left hanging, or I'm just like, hey, let's take a step back. But also the big questions, trying to figure out, why are we here? What are we doing? What are our belief systems? What do we really see community as? What are our actual truths, values, the things that kind of make life life. Because for me, I found it personally that it's important to kind of know yourself, because once you know yourself, you kind of know your own boundaries, you know your lines, you know what you're about, you know when something crosses a boundary, you've thought of these things. So yeah. And then what can you expect from this channel? One, authenticity. I'm just going to talk, and thank you for those joining in. Authenticity, because I am trying not to censor myself. Like I said, I grew up with social anxiety. So that was something that, was I going to voice my opinion? No. I was just going to keep quiet and just, think my thoughts. But now, as a grown woman and also someone trying to, break out of the shell that I guess I put myself in and trying to figure out who I am, I'm going to say what I want to say, but also in a an understanding way. I'm not just going to be a jerk. It's just, asking the questions, figuring things out, and hoping to learn from you and all that good stuff. And then this is also a space, I think, to hold judgment, to not judge. Like, we can really ask the weird questions, ask the funny questions, poke fun at things, but also like sincerely talk about them when needed to be, or like what we're actually doing here, right? Well, that's kind of my spiel. I am really big on like growth and learning and understanding oneself, and so hopefully as we go through this, we can grow and learn together. Okay, now that we're done with that, let's jump into what we're actually all here for, maybe, is the actual question. The question that today's topic is, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Spirituality and science, and why people think they can't coexist. And mind you, I'm reading off of some short notes, so if I'm not a natural at this yet, it's my first time, so I'm doing my best. And like I said, this is an open and safe conversation area, so no judgment, just curiosity. And as we go, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chats. I can see your chat, just so you know, I may not respond all the time because I'm not that dexterous, I guess. This is my first time, like I said, so I'm not a professional. So onward. So sorry. Let me read some of my notes real quick because they are in a terrible spot that it's extremely hard for me to see. So I need to, figure that out. Maybe, okay, they got stuck. Maybe they go here. Hello to everyone who has come into the chat. And like I said, I am not dexterous enough to really type everything at the same time. Also, I moved my mouse around and my desk is apparently not set up that great for the live, but we're learning today. Oh, we're learning. Okay. So, first and foremost, why do people see spirituality and science as opposites, or I guess versus, or maybe even conflicting? That's one of the first questions I wanted to like frame our conversation with first, I'm sorry, I need to figure out how to do these notes way better. Why do people see spirituality and science as opposites? So let's start there. First and foremost, I think cultural history has kind of shaped a lot of things because depending on where you grew up in your culture, there could be a lot more openness to spirituality or a lot less openness to spirituality. I think if you grew up maybe in church upbringing, there's a certain level of spirituality to that. It may not be the more whimsical, if that's the correct word, spirituality. It may be more strict, fundamental, like this or that way of thinking of spirituality. Um, I'm not sure if anybody who comes in, if it's more appropriate to say everybody's name and say hi, or just hi everyone who's coming into the chat. I appreciate you and thank you very much. Um, I think growing up, depending on where you grew up or depending on where you spend most of your time culturally, socially, there's a definite way that people speak about or think about spirituality or science. Um, I'm sorry. The live, it seemed like I'm losing my train of thought because it just seems like it's a lot. But give me 1 minute and I'm going to read this real quick to remember what I'm supposed to be saying. Oh, question for you all who are in the chat or who are watching live. Do you personally lean towards more spirituality or science, or do you actually prefer maybe your own combination of both that you personally are like, this is what I'm about? And do you also feel like combining those are like two sides of the same coin? Like, why not? I also think spiritually and like science, spirituality also fundamentally it's religious, right? Religion comes into play. And for certain religions, when we say the dominant culture of certain religions, they tend to, I don't want to say get a divide in the sense of purposeful, but and sometimes in this current climate, it is purposeful. It seems like, this would be much easier in person, wouldn't it? You know what? Let's skip this question because I don't know what I was thinking with this. Honestly, it's like my brain power is not, it's not with that. So let's go. When I've discussed, like me personally, I believe in the aspect of combining them, right? Spirituality and science. One, science can give you some input on things that like have been proven to work in the spiritual sense. The spirituality, there's prayer, there's meditation, there's even journaling. Uh, well, when you think of chakras, like crystals and stones. Sorry for the pause. I'm actually generally thinking. I think that's important because there are, even if it hasn't been proven or if it has, we'll get to there, those practices that have been proven to, hey, they do a little something. Um, there are certain things that even if there is no quote unquote like scientific proof, like there hasn't been a official study done on XYZ, even if to me, even if it just makes you feel better, and it helps you, then that is what you do. And that as long as you're not hurting yourself, not hurting others, kind of one of those spiritual practices, like, yeah, sure, go for it. If it makes you feel better, and like I said, not hurting yourself, not hurting others, okay, cool. So yeah. And sorry about the notes thing. I'm gonna keep referencing them. Maybe next time I'll like study them so I remember everything I'm supposed to be talking about. And I think those are actually examples of science and spirituality working together because like meditation, journaling, I even think what mindfulness practices have shown in science and scientifically to actually help like the nervous system, to help stress reduction, to help even people feel oneness or wholeness. I don't know, lack of a better word. with like the universe, with God, goddesses, whatever spiritual thing you believe in. And yeah, I'm sorry, I just keep referencing the notes. Hmm. One of the questions I had for you guys was, have you ever experienced someone like shutting you down either for your scientific beliefs or for your spiritual beliefs instead of feeling like it was open? I think for a lot of us that has occurred. I know for me personally, one of the first things that started when I started getting more into spirituality and actually like reading things more on a serious note. Um, Reading was one thing, but watching certain videos on YouTube, on Instagram, on all the social medias, it was, you find people that really embody spirituality in the sense of how they talk, how they move, and sometimes it comes off very, I don't want to use the term woo woo because that's kind of like uh, a negative connotation for people of like Native American descent and stuff like that. But there is certain like keywords or things that I remember hearing that even now when I hear them, I kind of take a step back to be like, what are they talking about? I think it's like holding space or resonates with you. They sound strange and they sound very unusual if you're not used to hearing those things. Like especially aloud in person instead of like reading a word. It's just like, okay, kind of sounds weird, but we'll go with it. Yeah. So I think that's one of those strange things. I've also noticed that sometimes, depending on how the words or terms are used, people can have a heightened emotional reaction to it. Like obviously, if you're maybe around strong evangelical Christian or religious people who take their religion very seriously, maybe that's the thing that they don't take it as more guidelines, but as like strict rules. When they hear people talking about yoga or meditation practices, there is some connotations of like I've heard primarily back in like maybe a decade ago growing up in newspapers and things like that where people were talking about like yoga is the devil's work. And it was kind of like was it xenophobia mixed in with like people being ignorant or naive or not willing to learn what it actually meant. I remember like, for me, teaching elementary kids, school kids, yoga in the sense of stretches, um, listening to their body, taking time to like breathe and quiet the mind. That's something that is a practice that can, without any really religious connotations to it. Especially, I think now people that I've heard who teach yoga to children, not in the sense of a yoga to children like an official title, they tend to make them. I think my daughter went to a daycare center where they did yoga poses, but they called them like animals. It was like doing, I think, the flamingo and things like that. Like it was a different animal moves, but it was still yoga. So she didn't learn like the technical terms, which kind of the bummer because the technical terms is like what the Hindu or India, like Indian actual like language, which would also be helpful because in different contexts as she got older, she could know like I know what that is instead of being like I know the flamingo, things like that. So that's kind of a bummer, but it's also like understandable that sometimes it's sad in the world we live in, but sometimes spiritual practices kind of have to be stripped down to their minimum or what they're technically about, as just so people who may take things much more serious or are ready to like fight people can be like appeased. So it's kind of a bummer there, but you know, I understand why, and I'm just like, okay, I'm moving onward. Okay. And then speaking of science and spirituality, would we actually want spirituality to be fully studied as a science? I personally kind of would, and I think that means the science, if it can't be studied officially, like yay or nay, like if this works, then I think the science hasn't caught up to the spirituality in the sense of we're now learning that there are certain like energies that people have. Maybe auras are an actual thing that shows up on some funny little scans or something. But I think since science has kind of been the forefront and spirituality more the back seat, there's a lot of things that haven't quite been studied fully. So yeah, that's a bummer. Sorry, I'm still reading notes, so if I keep just looking down and taking a second, I apologize. I'm just further thinking if I would want them to be studied like in a lab, it would really suck if it was proven like this does nothing. But at the same time, it should do like even something like, hmm, if I don't have an idea, maybe journaling, something that isn't really easy to like measure of what it's actually doing. I would imagine you're writing your thoughts out, so that's at least stress reduction. So even if there isn't like, oh, EKG machine shows this is happening. I don't know if that's the correct term or that's what you'd use, but I'm just using an example. Um, the anecdotal or the what's it? Because sometimes in science, when you do experiments, it's not necessarily like a literal like electrode things attached to a person. It's actually here, fill out this survey when you're done. And so even if fill out the survey when they're done from journaling for a week or so forth, if there is a positive, stress reduction or them just feeling better, and maybe they don't even know why or know exactly what way they're feeling better, they just know they are, then I would say that's been studied and it has shown, then yes, it's a positive thing and the evidence has shown, right? I think there's also like there's a placebo effect with that's a scientific thing that's already been studied where people are just told that you're getting the right medicine and then compared to the people who actually got the medicine and people who got nothing and we're also just not told, not there are people that are told that this is the certain medicine they're getting and it ends up being like sugar pills or something that shouldn't do anything. Then there are people who are told this is the medicine you're actually getting and it should do this and maybe they're actually, they're getting the medicine and then there are people who are like we're not giving you nothing, just sit here, you can leave in 30 minutes. The placebo effect thing has actually been studied and has shown that, yes, people just think they're getting better or they're taking medicine and yeah, oh, they get better and they take medicine. So spirituality wise, like mind over matter, like there is a certain connection that mind, spirituality, the soul, whatever have you, what you want to call it, does have resonance amongst the physical, right? I think was it like what happens when science denies spirituality or vice versa, spirituality denies science. Well, I think that's kind of where a lot of things are going again. There's like, in society where there seems to be like that push and pull. Um, Me personally, I think the most like average person is kind of just cool with both. I mean, the average person, obviously, the one who's like the 50th percentile, right in the middle, they're like, eh. I think most likely they wouldn't care if someone was doing meditation, journaling, all that good stuff. Humming, was it like the meditation where you actually make the sounds and stuff like that? Like they wouldn't care, even if you're in the front yard and that's what you do. It'd look weird. They'd be like, "Why are you in your front yard?" But it's your front yard, I guess. Um, Thank you all for joining right now. I just want to say thank you. And then let's continue on the topic. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. I think one of the things that we've noticed in like culturally when science denies spirituality or vice versa is obviously like right now we live in a capitalistic culture and we're kind of seeing an extreme end of that where it's not just like, oh, you're a millionaire. It's like, oh, you're a billionaire. Oh, who's yeah, trillionaire. What? We're getting up there. And so when people, like I said, not the 50th percentile, but the up there percentiles. And if I'm wrong about how the percentiles work, I'm just a lady. And I'm sorry if the mic's moving all around and I should have just hooked this in, but I didn't. Thank you for those who have joined in and actually asking questions. I think spirituality compares to just mind over matter, like my personal opinion, um, is that there are some people who push through things and may not be aware that maybe as they're pushing through, maybe they're thinking of themselves as like energy, or their consciousness is what they're pushing through. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to think of it and like on the spot think of it. Give me a moment. I think spirituality has a core essence of a longer, like a longer thinking pattern. Like you're not thinking of just now, you're kind of thinking of things as a whole. Like mind over matter can be something that just in that moment. But mind you, some people have mind over matter moments where their spirituality is like that was a catalyst for something. So I think that really depends on the person. And I really don't know. I don't have the answers for that. So that was my thoughts about that. I don't know. We see some comments. Ricardo asked, "Why is the conversation science or spirituality? When most of history, both were just as important and studied." Yes, but depending on cultural context, some people poo-poo certain ideas. So I'm just doing in the current cultural climate of, I think, American culture, since I'm American, we're seeing that once again, people are trying to pit spirituality or religion, whatever have you, against science and vice versa. And I guess it's more of the separation of things instead of seeing everything as a cohesive unit. And that kind of encompasses my whole thought process, that these things can coexist and kind of should, um, probably to varying degrees depending on the people or the community, but they probably should never fully be ignored. Like they kind of should be mixed together. So whatever is works the best for the most people, and obviously that leaves it up to the individual to go fully on into more spiritual or fully onto more science, but still have maybe as they grew up and in their culture having the template of a base of spiritual knowledge or a base of scientific knowledge. So that's always a jumping off point to be connected to their community. Like there's a certain layer of understanding amongst everybody. So now I'm reading some of the comments just so we can have some more interaction. Thank you very much. Victoria says, "I believe we are all here for a purpose, and sometimes we have to go through things because it's helping our spirit in the long run, or like beyond this realm," which I do actually agree with that, Victoria. Thursday, I believe I will be having a discussion about reincarnation. I may discuss other ideas of the afterlife as well, in not only history and culture. Mind you, I'll probably now learning how these notes were not the business for me. I'll make better notes. I'll probably like study them so I remember exactly where I'm going. So thank you very much for your comments. And thank you, Dennis. Yes, science is just a study of observable data. Unfortunately, we just aren't advanced enough to show consistent observation yet. Yes. For me, like I said, spirituality and science, if you're going to study it, if a spiritual practice that has shown, even anecdotally, maybe even for centuries, has shown that it does something, but science has yet to prove exactly what it does. It could just be that the science hasn't caught up with the spirituality of that measurement. And also, maybe there are certain things that aren't supposed to be measured. Like, even if science fully caught up, quote unquote, caught up, there are things that are left for mystery. I think that's, maybe that's something to also think about. Like, would you want every little bit of your spirituality or your religion to be dissected and to be known as, yes, this is a thing. No, this isn't a thing. This kind of works for if you are fall into this category. And I think for some people that would work, because depending on how your mind is organized and you don't like, and you're trying, like for me with self growth, if you're trying to do something more purposeful, yes, it'd be awesome. Just like side note, I went to Sedona last weekend. We went to like the Vortex. One of them, we did some hiking around there, and I got my aura photo and all that good stuff. Now, would it be cool if that aura photo could be taken to like a doctor who's actually like studied all this stuff and actually can say, yes, I can see this can be integrated into your healthcare. And first of all, healthcare being a thing that we can actually get like healthcare. But anyway, that's different. That'd be a different topic for another day. Um, Sorry. My mind went blank right now. Anyways, oh my goodness, I need to make better notes because my mind does go blank. Wow. Or I need to look up things spiritually as well as scientifically to be like, girl, why is your brain power not up to speed? Like, which actually that is a thing that actually has been scientifically proven that after childbirth, it takes like 2 years for a woman's like gray matter or something to go back to the previous size it was. So yeah, that really does affect you. It's a weird thing. I don't know. And let's see. Ricardo had another comment. I think the difference is the baseline in cultures, like you said earlier. Yeah. I think about how Catholic monks also studied astronomy and physics, giving us the modern calendar, but at the same time, these. So yeah, we do see like obviously like during the Renaissance and all that good stuff, there was more of the combination of things happening. I think thank you, Ricardo, because I am not as versed in the history of things. I used to be at some point, but that brain left. And I think that's one of those things that when you see in past that there was like more a combination of science and spirituality. One, it was kind of kept to a certain. I don't want to say technically like not a certain class. Um, kind of it was at some points, but when it comes like for example like Ricardo, you said the monks is that who was getting that knowledge really? Because it could be spread out. That's cool, but then that kind of sucks because not everybody was visiting the monastery to learn from the monks because they had to like live. But anyways, okay, sorry. Let's look at further in the notes and we'll continue this discussion. Yeah, like in our current political climate, for sure, there seems to be that separation of trying to pit people against each other. Science, spirituality versus like religion. Um, but let me know what you've been seeing because algorithms are whack and they only show you what they think you want to see or what you should see. So that gets weird. And I think even in our current like world, with capitalist society and the materialism aspect, there seems to be a lot of people that have a lot of quote unquote power, like in that realm, that are kind of devoid of spiritualism. Or if you see them talk about certain spiritualism, it's more in their realm of what they understand how society to them works. Like one of the things I've noticed is I follow and am interested in Brian Johnson's Blueprint. And in that, although he talks a lot about like being like the healthiest person alive and all that, and even talks about like I think the vagus or vagus nerve, not sure how to pronounce it. He does like that every day or twice a week or something with that, which helps on a spiritual level or should, and also like a physical level. Sorry, also a physical level. Whenever I've seen him speak, which I don't watch too much because I just don't want to. When I've seen him speak about that, he doesn't ever talk about the spiritual aspect of things. So that's also why when it comes to Blueprint, I'm kind of like, hey, that's great that you're getting like in tip top U shape, but what about the rest of you? So that's also something like I'm currently working on the side to try to kind of do a blueprint for the soul thing. It's very much in its infancy, so don't quote me on it. We'll see where it goes, and I'm kind of my own test subject to see what works for me, and I'm just willing to share it eventually as I figure things out. Doo-doo-doo. So let's do a fun thought experiment. In a world where spirituality and science fully coexist, where like the media isn't pitting things against each other, politics isn't involved in pitting things against each other, there's like a certain base level of understanding for both. What would that world look like to you? Would we be teaching children, or would it be more like in high school you take a class like government or something, but it'd be like spirituality and science? I don't know. For me personally, I imagine it more so like what I wish the world was right now. I would much prefer my daughter learning TK and kindergarten learning like philosophy at that age. There is some that gets like sprinkled in there. I think we've all heard of it, like the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. But I would like, instead of that being like a saying that you just do, an understanding of it would be great for them to learn. And then also like I think the upsetting part of current political stuff is like when people try to go to the extreme end of like, one of the things is like consent and bodily autonomy. Like I'm like, yeah, teach children that, hey, if you don't want to hug that person, you don't need to hug them. Yeah, if you don't want to hold their hand, respectfully say no, thank you. But yeah, anyway, that's probably another whole different topic for another day. But that's just my 2 cents. That's a very good idea, Ricardo. It says he wrote, for me, it would be world religion and philosophy, the same way some private schools still teach scripture. Yes. I also wouldn't mind if, world religions were taught in the actual sense of from childhood to high school, like varying degrees of what they would be taught in the sense of understanding. So once you're out in the real world, you're 20, 25, 30 years old, someone says I don't know how to pronounce it, Sikh, ski, you would just be like, oh, okay, no problem. And you would know if there is certain dietary restrictions, you would know if there's a holiday coming up or some celebration, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know about that. So I think those things kind of need to be taught in the sense of just you learn them as you go along, like just sprinkled throughout. Yeah, I think for me personally, um, right now, I think currently how things are, like spirituality versus science, it's made it harder, like not in general. Obviously, you take in what you want. So spiritually or religiously, if you went to a church and maybe the pastor said something you agreed with and then said something you didn't, you can easily be like, I agreed with that. I didn't agree with that. But for me personally, kind of hard for me to, one, I don't like wasting time, so I don't want to go to like 7 different churches to figure out if it's actually a safe space or what they're teaching or what they're preaching about is actually like, 99% of what I also agree with, or at least on the line of being like, I get you. So I think that's just me talking. Side point. So that's when that becomes difficult because that's like kind of feels like a waste of time to keep going. But I know that's also part of the process, the journey. Maybe I'm just not there yet. I think a lot of us can agree with that. Like sometimes a spiritual practice, a religious practice, or a scientific practice, something that can actually help you, you're just like, I'm not there yet, and you don't want to do it. Yeah. And then another response from Ricardo, love it. Exactly. They grew up around a lot of Desi people who are typically, yeah, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. And I wish I could have known more about their culture, respect, and general interest. Yes. When I was in college, I had a speech class, and I think it was one person who they were scared. um, he, for his demonstration speech, he came up and said that he was going to show us how he ties his turban, or I'm assuming that's what it's called. But like I said, I wasn't taught this. Oh, okay. Thank you, Olivia. It is Sikh. Thank you. But people, like a lot of the people in the class kind of took us not a step back. Obviously, we're sitting, we weren't standing, but we're wondering like, are you allowed to do that? Nobody really knew if that was like an okay thing or it was a private thing or if it was like something he was just willing to do, but it was like not proper. And then he laughed and was like, no, it's fine. They just, that's what it's just what they do, I suppose. And I guess I should Google this to figure out if that is actually what they do, or if he was like, no, it's a special thing. You guys are all part of it now. But he explained to us how he did it, and he took his hair down. His hair was great, super long. Um, and then he showed us how he wrapped it, and even said he uses another mirror that's on in his bathroom wall that reflects like the back of his hair, so he can like see the whole wrap and everything. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. Doo, 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 doo. And I also think going back to the framework of if like science and spirituality were truly like connected in our society, like that's just how it worked. I think healthcare, that would be a whole different ballgame probably. Only would someone recommend like, hey, you are low in this vitamin, eat this food. It may make you feel more grounded, or maybe your body prefers warm food or cold foods, and it would actually have that like the doctor would see you more as like a whole human being. So they may even be like, hey, this is kind of stress related. I can give you this medicine to like lower your blood pressure and stuff. Or I can say, hey, do some of these meditative exercises, come back in like a month or two, we'll take your blood work again and we'll see how, or maybe not even take your blood work because if like a science hasn't caught up to actually being able to measure that, it would be like, let's just take your anecdotal evidence of how you're feeling now. And then probably also check your blood pressure and blood work because that is something that actually can kind of be checked. Um, but yeah. And on a more personal level, asking you guys, what's something in your life you would like to see health, not health, science and spirituality meet? Health, maybe your job, where people see everybody as more of a whole human being instead of just like, hey, come in here as as the employee and then clock out, but actually seeing you as a real person. Maybe having meditation breaks, like cigarette breaks, but it's like, no, you can go over there, sit on the nice cushions, you know, have the nice music on and take a little break. And also, maybe you have done something in your life that kind of combines those two. Maybe there's a creative thing you do. I know people with journaling, that could be something. Maybe even painting, or maybe you're not actively painting a masterpiece, but you are painting and that gets you in like flow. And that's actually like scientifically proven as a flow state, like you are in the moment, but that also goes into mindfulness. So that's where it's combined. And maybe that's something you've added into your life where you're kind of like, oh, I should add it. And Victoria says she's down for medication breaks. Well, that would be interesting for them to actually dole out medication. But then that would mean they definitely see you as a whole human being because they probably would know exactly where you are and your health and all that. And that'd be a way different world because it'd also be like a whole trust thing of them knowing all your information, all of it. Yeah. I've made it to the end of my notes. Wow. Okay. And now we know maybe I also, sorry, I keep moving the mic. I probably should have attached it, but I didn't want to. I just, like I said, that's on me. So what do you think? Let me know what you all think. Are you more science? Are you more spiritual? Are you somewhere in the middle? Are you that 50th percentile person who's like, they can do what they want in their front yard? If they're meditating, that's cool. I personally, yeah, like I said, I'm in the boat of if you're not harming yourself, like actively harming yourself, and even then that kind of goes on the towing the line of like what someone else would consider harm. I guess it would be harm in the sense of like physical and mental health because you can't really we cannot yet measure spiritual health. So you could be doing something that spiritually is like making you all out of whack, but we don't really measure that, and I don't know if that really affects things in that way. It'd be like a soul thing, and well, that's between you and your maker or whoever you believe with. I guess if you're like messing up your soul, because I don't think we know how to fix that. Ricardo states that I think I would like to see more empathy and understanding from both sides. I see a lot of people dismissing religion, which I do think can be a force for good. At the same time, I see spiritual people act similarly by dismissing the intellectual conversation. Yes, I also agree with that. I feel like it's a cohesive thing. Like we're just missing pieces that either science hasn't caught up to spirituality and spirituality hasn't caught up to science. I'm not sure if it worked that way, but yeah, that there's definitely a lot of, I think at the core, it's just a lot of people who don't really know who they are or are angry about who they are that I think if we kind of work on ourselves more and kind of figure out who we actually are, like be honest with yourself. Like if you're kind of a jerk, just be like, man, I'm kind of a jerk. But at least people around you know you're kind of a jerk. Do you want to work on that? And you're like, yeah, I want to work on that a little bit. Um, or, like that was something growing up that I was about with my friends. Like I kind of am pretty good at reading people. And so especially when you're friends with someone, you kind of definitely get to know who they are. Um, but it's interesting when you learn someone's boundaries or lines and they're not aware of it, or a personality trait that they're not fully aware. So it's important for you to know yourself so you kind of know where their boundaries are if they're not aware of where their own boundaries are, or if they're not aware of their maybe their character flaws is a word to say, or their primary character attributes. I don't know. But yeah, so it's like if you know yourself, you can help other people know themselves as well and figure stuff out. So that's what I guess, these topics and discussions that are going to be coming up, and I'm trying to continue to do and definitely get better at because this is whack. Uh, is trying to figure this stuff out, and once you kind of figure yourself out, you can kind of see the world in a different way. And I think it's one of my sisters who mentioned like certain books. I think the Fifth Agreement and the Four Agreements is kind of like when you see people as just other human beings, like that love that you're working on in yourself and then kind of exudes out of you. You're kind of you give people more understanding. So instead of being like, this jerk cut me off, you're kind of like, wow, they must be busy today, or they're in a mood and they need to work that out. Um, let's see. Victoria stated, not everyone has empathy though. But that also goes back into like when I imagine a world that is more so how I think it should be, it's like children being taught empathy, philosophy, morals, ethics. So even if by the time they're 10, 15 years old, or 25 and they're a grown ass adult, um, apologies, they realize that they're kind of a jerk, they at least have a moral, ethical, empathetic framework, a base that everybody else in their community or society has. So at least instead of being completely like depleted in that department where it was never strengthened in any way, they can now have like that baseline. I think that goes back into like certain people have certain strengths, and if it goes back into soul work and things like that, that certain people are in different levels of understanding to begin with. I hope that makes sense. I don't know. I'm reading some of the comments. Ricardo states, like, I want to be religious and it has shaped me a lot being raised super Catholic, but I was also taught that it was okay to disagree and question things, and not everyone is, so it's tough. Yes, not everyone has the same template as you. I think that comes with your own self awareness and understanding. Then obviously that's a gift for you because then you can go out there in the world and have that understanding amongst other people. Then hopefully those you interact with, one on a superficial level, you may be able to be like, hey, are you okay? If someone is like just angry and upset that day, but then, or you can just be like, hey, that's not on me. So when someone you don't even know, say a stranger just blew up or was like cutting you off in traffic, just being a jerk that day, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to put that energy out there because I'm cool. Like if you know who you are, you know what you're doing, and you know that that's on them. So that's a good way of like boundaries, self awareness, knowing who you are as a person. Well, I think we're going to be closing soon. So let me read some more comments and see what's going on. Dennis stated, is empathy nature or nurture? Well, obviously, or not obviously, that could be both. That's one of those questions that I think scientifically people have asked a lot because there's like sociopaths, psychopaths, people who empathy is really not there, but it really depends on how they're raised. If it's kind of not there, but oh, they're okay, or then it's depending on how they're raised, it can get much worse in that department. So yeah, but like I said, science hasn't caught up to that, so we can't measure. Well, you can kind of measure it, I guess, in the way of studies in the sense of anecdotal evidence, Probably some genetic markers may have already been found out, which I'll probably look up later because I'm curious. Um, and then also like surveys and things like that to show. So yeah, I don't know. Danielle states, if we were taught to be aware of our small thoughts, in tune and understanding of our emotional self and nurturing of our physical body, then relationships are more working together and accepting. Yes. And that would be involved in like, obviously, if you don't think about the school system in the way of like my child shouldn't be taught that at school. One, I kind of disagree because society as a whole kind of dictates our interactions with each other and what is acceptable and what isn't, or what's helpful to most of us and what isn't. And considering our current technological standpoint is that we're getting more easily separated, considering I'm talking online in my webcam on YouTube Live, meaning we're not in person. Someone could be watching this and they're nowhere near the community I am in. So in that regard, things like public education, it aligns with public good, where certain things should be baseline taught. So even if some people say like religion shouldn't be in schools, to a certain degree it should, because that is how the world works. You're going to meet people of different religions. You're going to meet people of different races. You're going to meet people of different social classes. So some of those things should always be taught to a certain degree. So there is a baseline understanding for everybody. Um, Even if it's not your best subject, by the time you're 17, you should be like, I at least know XYZ about this. Of course, everyone does. So you can always start an understanding, philosophical or political or conversation at a base understanding. And I think with our current climate of how things are, that is sorely lacking, because you can genuinely meet someone who they don't know what you're talking about. You can be going to school in California, maybe a private school, maybe just a higher income tax area school compared to a lower income tax area school, and then someone else in another state like Tennessee or Washington or anything like that, and not they may not know what you're talking about, this war or this was it thing that happened, or how much that thing affected everybody. Like they could make just in their textbook from kindergarten to like senior year could have just say like a sentence, but yours was like, I wrote a whole paper on that. So that's kind of a bummer. Ricardo also states, how does your spirituality affect your day-to-day decisions, if at all? To be honest, I don't interact with the world that much. And I think this is part of the process of trying to interact with the world, more in my safe space of what I'm comfortable with. I guess this is also my process of trying to get out more in the world. I think normally my spirituality, my moral framework, when I say walk my daughter to school, if I pass somebody, more or less automatically, I'm ready to say hello, good morning, smile at them, make eye contact. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and I'm like, okay. Because there are plenty of people around my neighborhood that I've seen them since my daughter was in TK and she's in kindergarten now, and they had kids around the same age. So you think a wave, a good morning, at some point in the like 130 days you pass by each other. But no, and I'm just like, well, okay. And it kind of is a bummer. It kind of is a bummer because um, one of the women that I pass by on the regular, um, seems to also, or maybe is undiagnosed with PCOS. Now, obviously, it's her health, her body, not my place to say. But then, from my framework of being someone with PCOS and having to figure out, oh, that amount of hair loss is not normal. Oh, I'm vitamin deficient. Oh, I'm also iron deficient. Okay. It's kind of like if someone else could have came up to me like, hey girl, I see you might be vitamin D deficient or you might need some iron. I'd be like, what? No, but that's me. I would have been like, thank you. Let's talk some more. But obviously not everybody had like this, not everybody had the same framework of thank you for letting me know. And obviously since they've never made like active eye contact with me, never actually said hello, that friendly wasn't 1% point of acquaintance friendship was ever made. I'm kind of like, okay, I guess I don't know if you just don't want to talk. Like to anybody. Like you could just see everybody as enemy. I don't know you. But obviously, yeah. maybe, like Ricardo said, maybe that is my spirituality, not my spirituality, but my discomfort from anxiety and social situations. So that's something I need to work on to kind of bridge the gap since I'm aware that that is a thing. Not even her health wide, just bridging the gap between someone else who I've seen kind of actively avoid other people. So yeah, maybe that could be a to do for myself. Well, I think we are going to be closing this chat up, and I want to thank all of you for showing up and being here. And I hope this was enlightening to you, as I had an enjoyable time. It was great seeing your guys, all of your responses and your chat here. This was like very interesting and fun and so on to see. On Thursday, I'll be doing this again, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., and we'll be discussing reincarnation, and I may sprinkle in more interesting afterlife information that maybe other cultures have. And, hopefully we can discuss that, and you can tell me your opinions. Maybe it's more religious framework, maybe it's more spiritual, maybe it's more science-based. But we can discuss that. And then coming up on Instagram, I believe, I will start posting um, more of like a schedule of what some of these discussion topics will be. Some of them will be fun. Some will, like I said in the beginning, some will be movies, some will be games, some will be, anime related. Um, Not just the big questions, but the little questions, the things that make life fun. So we won't be like serious and hard all the time. It'll be like light and we're just having a good time. And yeah, so I hope you're doing well. And I hope you had a great day since it's evening now, for me at least. Not sure if anybody's going to be watching this later, but yeah. So thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next time. Thursday, 7 p.m. We'll be here. Was there anything else that I needed to say? I don't think so. All right. Bye.